Hi, and welcome back to Brennan Executive Insights. I'm Nick Sone, Chief Customer Officer at Brennan. Today we're talking about the cloud, and I'm joined by Brennan's Director of Digital, Mal Shafi.
Good morning, Nick. Thank you for having me.
Anytime, Mal. So Mal, when we think about the cloud and we go back in time, maybe 5, 6, 7 years, there was some promises made by the cloud providers, and particularly when I think about public cloud in its early days. What do you think those promises were, and do you think we've achieved what they set out to achieve?
Oh yeah, it was such a new frontier. So the idea of moving from capex to opex, from moving from static to consumption-based modeling, which is so new into the market at that time, that the business case was very new and it stacked up on paper. The trouble you have is it's actually really hard to make that transition and do it well. We're talking about not Wild West or anything like that, but we didn't quite have the governance or the framework or the security regulations that you needed across an environment to make that transition smooth. So whilst the business cases are still there and what they promise can be realized, it's incredibly hard to actually get that result.
Yeah, and when I think back, I think a lot of the business cases, especially in the early days, were premised on a cost saving and customers looking to reduce what they spend on their compute power. And I'm not sure that has been achieved.
No, again, it's such a tricky one, because if you look at the TCV analysis, especially if you move towards the hyperscalers, they use a lot of complex tooling to help you understand what a like for like would be using on the 5 or the 7 Rs. And on paper, it looks like it's going to stack up, especially if you compare air conditioning, electricity, all the headcount, all the stuff that goes with running an on-premise or cloud environment. However, like in the football team, great on paper, bad on grass, it's really hard when you actually move it across, because what you move very often isn't like for like. And the big difference is you've opened up a world of consumption base where you can, you can, at a click of a button, deploy more, increase your storage, you can increase your compute, you can spin up new environments. Using the analogy of your on-premise environment is a bit like you've got your kids at a restaurant. You've got to ask your parents if you can have more food, and with it the bill comes, you see the price, and you can make wise decisions. With public cloud, it's like having teenagers open your fridge. They can take as much as you want, and you cannot regulate or control that unless you put the right guardrails in place, which is so important with public cloud.
Yeah, look, I think I'm out there talking to our customers every day, and we do hear that bill shock is an issue in the public cloud, and that they, often end up paying exactly as you described for, things they didn't realise they were going to be billed for, or that they had turned on for longer than they should have. What are some tips you've got around, the governance around the public cloud?
Exactly, it's that word. It's the governance. You need to have real-time, almost visibility in what is your bill today. Almost like when you look at your mobile phones now, like how much is my current bill now? I don't want to get the bill at the end of the month. And also you need to have a alert set up, or you need to have parameters established which are, okay, who can actually provision inside the environment? If they provision above a certain amount or a certain compute or a certain size or certain kind of like architecture, who gets a flag to let you know that's done? Also, if they leave it up and running, how long do I get a ping to let me know? There's a good example of years ago, I had a customer who their bill was X. One of their engineers spun up a POC, proof of concept, with a very high compute power, which would have been the equivalent of their monthly bill in a day, spun it up, forgot to kill it, went on a holiday for 2 weeks, came back, and they basically spent their year's budget in that month with no one knowing until the bill came.
Yeah, and that can be a real challenge, I guess, for not just the IT department, but the finance department too.
Your CFO is never going to be happy with you from that side of it. Unfortunately, the business case didn't stack up on the POC as well. So sometimes if you're doing it and it's driving huge innovation, which is what public cloud is there to do, to enable that innovation. But again, you've got to be able to fail fast, and it's all about having framework, governance and policies in place to make sure that you're doing it in a controlled manner.
So just thinking about the cloud, what do you think the fundamentals are around the infrastructure and what customers need to have in place to get the most benefit from cloud?
A strong business case and strong understanding of success criteria. Like if you're just looking to move like for like, understanding which of the different cloud options is going to be best for you. Is that a public cloud solution? Is that a private cloud solution? What's your IT, what's your business roadmap? And what does IT need to do to achieve the outcomes of your business over the next kind of like 12, 36 month horizon? That's really important to understand then what the cloud or the infrastructure part of your business does to facilitate those outcomes.
Yeah, and I guess you must be seeing a rise in the prevalence of both hybrid and multi-cloud solutions in our customer base. Do you want to talk about the difference between those two?
Yeah, I mean, the true definition is hybrid is a public and a private solution. A multi-cloud is two public cloud solutions. However, most people use the phrases so interchangeably. I wouldn't get bogged down if I was you too much on the terminology of that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that is true is we are seeing multiple complex environments out there, be they public or private or SaaS or IaaS or PaaS. We are seeing a proliferation of those environments in all of the customers we deal with.
That's probably the key point there, which is the IT environment. If you go back those 5-7 years, the complexity now to then, it's just a stark contrast. If you go back 15-20 years, you had an IT environment that wasn't even plugged into the internet, so security wasn't even an issue. You could have anything kind of open because it was all in-house. And also now you've got SaaS providers, you've got shadow IT, more prolific than ever before. You've got public cloud, sometimes multiple public cloud. You might have on-premise kit. You might have kit inside a private cloud solution. And most organizations are either being acquired or have been acquired or going through something like this, which adds extra complexity and interdependencies as well. So it's a sprawled spaghetti junction that you need strong governance, rigor, everything around and the framework to make sure that you know what you've got and what's running.
Okay, so that's a really good point, and I think you're right. There is a huge complexity there. We've heard for years about the single pane of glass to manage all of the things that sit behind it. Has that become a reality?
Oh yeah, look, it's a bit mythical, hey, like the one ring. It can be done. The way you have to do it is you have to have a systematic approach to understand it first of all. So you have to understand what your estate is. And most organizations don't actually know, the full assets or estates, what's running on which. Sometimes you get organizations and they've got a laptop in a cupboard, like it just says, do not turn it off. And it might be their core application. So you need to know where is everything, what's everything doing, and then what's the roadmap of how it interconnects and what's going to be, sunsetted, what's going to be retired, what's going to be re-architected, what's my future state architecture look like. Once you know that, you can start to create that single pane of glass. And you have to make sure everything talks to each other, communicates, passes information across, so that then you're able to see it as a living organism. And it's a bit like, the human body. You can see all bits interconnected and what they do, rather than siloed and trying to look at it through that path.
Okay, so if I think about how do I start that journey?
Yeah, look, your first thing you do is to map your estate. Yep. Understand where things are, what runs what talks to what's intercoupled. If I turn off X, if I turn out this light switch, does my whole organization go down? And then also start to understand with, okay, well, what applications are key? It might be part of your BCP mapping. It might be part of your IT estate mapping. But see where it all is, understand what it all does, and then start to understand where you want it to look like. Because I guarantee you, across your estate, there's huge inefficiencies. So just by getting an efficiency drive across that initial one will reduce your estate, and then you've got a leaner environment to put that kind of rigor and framework and governance around.
Yeah, look, and that's just the infrastructure side. I want to move on from that a little bit. So some of the major benefits that we see into the future are around data, AI, the insights that organizations can get from this wealth of data they've collected from their customers. What are your tips and thoughts on how we're going to get the most out of that in the next few years?
That's such a tough one because, CEOs or board members are going to be hearing AI, they're going to be seeing it, discussing it on the golf course, seeing it in AFR about driving innovation. And the next thing they're going to go to the IT or CIO and be like, give me AI, give me insight. You have to know the questions you want to drive from it, because AI there is to validate or invalidate ideas and successes. But to do that, first of all, again, it all goes back to you have to have your environment structured. So you've got to have your data structured in a way so that the data can be interrogated from an AI tool, and it's layers of a pyramid. Without having a really strong infrastructure foundation, without having really strong engineering above that, one data lake or repository where all your data is going in the right kind of formatting, then AI can ask that and generate questions from that. But without having those two pieces in place, you can pay for the most expensive AI tool, but it's not getting the food it needs to feed off.
Okay, I agree with that. I think the next issue that we're going to come across and that's live today is the security. So we're collecting lots of rich data. How are we securing it? How are we making sure that no one gets access to it that shouldn't?
And that's, I think in the current climate is probably the number one consideration for anyone who's going through AI journey or any kind of like cloud journey is that security side. If I think about 10 years ago, I used to play a part in insurance. And cybersecurity was just gone onto the market, and people were like, oh, is this going to be a new insurance line? I don't think it'll ever take off. And now you look at the money that goes through cybersecurity, and you look at the amount of threat vectors that occur and the amount of attacks that happen. It's so prevalent, and it's always someone else until it's you. So having security set up in the right way, the right posture, understanding what your risk appetite is, because you can never be fully secure, but understand what's right for you, is so key. And especially if you start to play in the AI world as well, it's understanding, okay, am I gathering AI from just my data and it's staying inside my walls? Am I driving insight from the internet, open internet, and I'm not touching inside my walls? Or actually, am I sharing stuff inside to out? And that can become highly dangerous, because again, it's just another door for people to get through. So not just from your AI point of view, but from your cloud journey, is to make sure that you've got the right security governance across everything that you do, because there's no point having an incredibly secure IT environment if someone spins something up which just opens the door straight into it as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good feedback. We definitely see today a convergence around our cloud offerings in market, our data and AI offerings in market, and the need to ensure that they're governed and secure.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't treat those as silos either. Like, you have to treat it as an overarching security policy. You've got to have your framework, whatever you're adhering to, NIST, Essential 8, whatever it may be, is to make sure that you're working really closely, and to have that DevSecOps mindset, which is everything has to be secure. Or if it's being built in a POC sandpit part way, it never touches anything. So you can be less governance around this, for instance, but this is going to be faces its high governance. So it's to understand your risk posture and to make sure that you just have this framework in place to minimize your risk. You'll never zero it, but minimize it. Last thing you want to do is get breached because of stupidity.
And let me switch gears a little bit to applications. So we have seen a proliferation of applications in the organization's environments, and that's SaaS-based applications, cloud-based applications. There's hundreds of them, and there's probably 10 or 15 launched every day. What are your thoughts on how to best manage that proliferation?
Yeah, gosh, it's complex, isn't it? Again, if I just go back 15, 20 years, I probably started my business career and I used probably 2 applications. And I use Internet Explorer, whereas now an organization would have anywhere between 10 to 200 applications inside that business, and then you're going to have multiple versions. And now as you move to SaaS as well, that creates a whole new issue, because then you've got, how are they interconnecting with your systems? What's your APIs look like? What's your data? Where is it being stored? Who's it being stored with? What's their governance policy? Because it's really good if you're super safe, but then Sony gets hacked, and all of a sudden, every PlayStation 5 user or PlayStation 4 user has got their details out there as well. So you could do nothing wrong, and you can still get it wrong. So then it becomes really complex about how knowing your vendors, knowing your suppliers, asking them the right questions. What security regulations do they comply with? To make sure that they fit in with what your security framework should be as well.
So returning to the cost of the cloud, the flip side of that equation is value. And how do we see the organizations that are doing it best extracting value from the cloud?
Yeah, I think with value, it's so important to know what is success look like. I remember very early, and I still see them now, is the business cases is just to get off-prem or to get out of a DC to move to a public cloud, but in which case you're doing a like for like. So your value is, I'm going to pay a project cost to move, I'm going to move to a CapEx to OpEx model, which is parable, maybe a bit cheaper, often more expensive, but the business is going to see no actual value from that. So, well, hang on, I came on Friday, it was running like this, and on Monday, it's running pretty much the same. How do I justify that? You have to understand what your horizons look like. So maybe moving to the cloud is step one, but are you baking it into re-architecture or application upgrades or changes to enable you then to drive the insight, to drive the business forward? Now, is it to drive data? Is it to make sure you've got scalable applications? Is it because you have certain periods of the year where your applications are highly stressed or failed over, and in which case you can just use elasticity of cloud to scale up? A good example was I worked with a betting organization, and they did about 80% of their revenue on one day, Melbourne Cup, and they used to basically get all of their dev and prod environments and put them into production for that one day, and the CIO used to sit there looking at the environment and never enjoy Melbourne Cup, because he thought, if this falls over, we're gone, like it's huge impact for them. Whereas when I moved to public cloud, when it was coming up to Melbourne Cup, we would just increase elasticity by a few click of a buttons to enable them to have 10x on the environment. So you could actually finally enjoy the Melbourne Cup. So that's understanding what is your business need, solution around that can drive value. If you don't, it's very easy just to do like for like, let it sprawl, your environment ends 3 times the size, 5 times the cost, and no one feels that any value's been driven from that.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, and I definitely agree with this, is that the business needs to set its strategy. It needs to then set a whole bunch of objectives that the business is trying to achieve, whether it be a growth objective, or maybe a savings objective or efficiency objectives, and then understand how the cloud can aid in achieving those objectives, and that forms the business case for going to cloud.
100%. It's always top down. You have to understand what the organization is trying to achieve and what IT's part in achieving that is. If you're siloed from that strategy, it's really hard to drive insight. If they're looking for IT to drive the insight for the business, it's really hard again, because you have to know the direction. Are you on an operational push? Are you on a growth push? Are you on an expansion? What's the business looking to do, and how can IT facilitate that success is the only way I think to approach it.
So you would have seen some classic mistakes that organisations make in moving to cloud. Do you want to talk about a couple of those?
Yeah, the most common one is they rush it. Like they'll have, okay, my kit might expire in 2 years, and my DC contract might expire in 2 years, and then they take such a long time to actually make a decision what they're going to do that in the end it always ends up a rushed migration. And the second you have a time pressure, quality can be risked then, because you've just got to get it done. Plan early, execute early, get the business on board early, understand what the business is trying to do, map your plan around that, and give yourself time to do it so that you're not rushed. And therefore, the more time you have to plan it, actually the better value you're going to achieve as well, because success criteria are more simple or more defined.
So for this season of Executive Insights, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to ask all of my guests 3 questions. Okay, so I'd like you to answer these ones in the context of cloud.
Okay.
You need to tell me something strategic.
Strategic with cloud, I'm going to go back to, I'll probably hark on to the same answer again before, which is understand the business value that you're trying to achieve with cloud. And then once you understand that, build yourself a really solid framework, really solid governance, and a governance both in terms of how it's run, how it's provisioned, but also from that security lens. And that will enable you to give the foundations to achieve the strategic directions or outcomes you're looking for as a business.
Okay, good. So that was strategic. Now, tell me something tactical.
Tactical is understand your IT environment. Like from a basic level, understand what's in the cupboard, what's in the rack, which application runs where. Build the efficiency of knowing your assets and your estate to then be able to condense it and optimize it to give you the chance then to move into the strategic.
Yeah, good. Okay, now I've left this to the end because it's the hardest one. Tell me something practical.
Again, practical will probably tap into the tactical, which is you got to just understand your IT environment. So from a practical level, there's no point in having a really good strategic plan if you just don't have the Lego bricks to put it together to make your Death Star at the end or your Millennium Falcon. So the practical is give yourself the pieces, understand what you're trying to do as a business, strategic level, understand where you have it all, and then from a practical level, set yourself up for success. Your org structure, your understanding of your IT environment, your understanding of your technology, look at stuff like if you're using multiple vendors, do they have a SaaS roadmap? There's no point in continuing to support an application if they're about to go to SaaS. If they're going to SaaS, does it come with pre-baked APIs? Like if you're picking something from a practical level, is it all going to talk together? Because you mentioned earlier about a multi-sprawled cloud environment, it's going to get more and more complex. And the idea is you have to use the best possible tools to decrease that complexity in an ever-increasing complex world. So it's an oxymoron, but it's the best advice I can give you.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. And thanks for going first in my strategic, tactical, and practical.
You're welcome, Nick. Thank you.
Well, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you for joining us. Come back next time for the next Brennan Executive Insights.